Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into something that has really been causing a stir in the AI community.
Yeah, it's a new technique called self-refine, and it's really pushing the boundaries of what large language models can do.
And we're talking about enabling AI to essentially self-critique and improve its own output.
That's it.
Very cool. The research paper we're looking at today focuses on self-refines, iterative refinement with self-feedback, and full disclosure, it gets pretty technical in here.
It does, but that's what we're here for.
Exactly. So for someone like you who lives and breathes this stuff, what is it about this that has you so excited? What makes this stand out?
Well, it's the potential, really. I think we've all seen how LLMs can sometimes be,
A little rough around the edges.
yeah, a little rough around the edges, right? Their output might be technically correct, but it's lacking that nuance, that self-awareness that we as humans can bring to the table. And self-refine is really all about bridging that gap.
Okay, so instead of having to have a whole other AI system to kind of provide that feedback, this is all about an AI being its own editor.
Exactly. And it's not just like fixing typos or grammatical errors.
Mm-hmm.
This is about the AI understanding what it's actually trying to achieve with a task, and then analyzing its own work for clarity, for tone, even looking at potential biases and then making adjustments to get there.
So it's more than just a fancy spell checker. We're talking about AI that can really understand the subtle ways we use language and then adapt its own style accordingly.
Yes, you've got it. And it's really cool because it all happens within a single LLM. The researchers tested this using some models that you've probably heard of, like GPT 3.5 and GPT-4, and the results were impressive, even across a wide range of tasks. We're talking writing different kinds of creative text formats, generating computer code, even tackling some math problems.
Okay, now you got my attention. What kind of results are we actually talking about here? Like, did the AI actually improve its own work in measurable ways?
Yeah, in many cases it did. For example, when they were testing this out with coding tasks, they noticed improvements not only in just the, correctness of the code itself, but also in its efficiency and speed. So we're talking about the AI looking back at its own code, identifying areas for optimization, and then going back and actually rewriting it to be faster and more elegant.
Wait, hold on. So it's not just spitting out lines of code. It's understanding what it just wrote and then going back and making it better.
That's exactly right.
That sounds like a programmer's dream.
It is. And it wasn't just about speed. They also used self-refine to improve the readability of the code. So think like adding in helpful comments or giving variables names that actually make sense instead of just, random letters and numbers.
Because let's be honest, even for experienced programmers, trying to decipher somebody else's code can feel like you're trying to translate ancient hieroglyphs.
Exactly. Self-refine helped the AI make its code more understandable and easier to work with, which is a huge deal in the world of software development.
It is, it is. And I'm starting to see why this has people really excited. Because if AI can learn to code better, what else could it do with this kind of ability with self-refine? What other tasks were they able to test it on?
They tested it on a whole bunch of stuff, actually. There's this one example in the paper where they had the AI take a positive product review, and then they tasked it with making it super negative.
Really?
Yeah. It's a fascinating look at how self-refine can be used to understand and manipulate sentiment.
Wow. So beyond just swapping out like positive words for negative words, the AI is grasping the deeper sentiment and then adjusting the entire tone of the review.
You got it.
That's a little bit unnerving if I'm being honest.
It is. It really speaks to the potential power of this technique.
Hmm.
In another example, the AI used self-refine to go back and rewrite a request that sounded a little bit too direct, maybe even a little rude.
And it was able to actually make it more polite. Okay, I have to admit, color me impressed. Like, what kind of changes did it make?
Well, instead of just stating a demand, it added in some pleasantries, started using more conditional language, basically figured out how to make the email less likely to get flagged as spam or something like that.
That's incredible. It's like the AI just taught itself email etiquette, basically, just by analyzing its own work and then refining it based on what it was trying to get out of the interaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier that they even tested this on math problems.
You did?
And there's a case where the AI actually gets a problem wrong initially, but then it goes back using self-refine, analyzes its work, and actually figures out the correct solution.
Exactly.
Wow, so this isn't just about catching typos or making code prettier. It's about the AI actually understanding when its logic is flawed and then going back and correcting itself. I mean, that is a whole other level of capability.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, did they say anything in the paper about how the AI knows when to stop? Because you wouldn't want it just going on refining forever and ever, right?
That's a great question, and it's something they address. They introduce this concept of what they call stopping conditions.
Stopping conditions.
Yeah.
So there's a point where it says, okay, I think this is good enough.
Exactly. They basically give the AI a set of rules to determine when its output meets the requirements, whether that's a certain level of politeness in an email or getting that correct answer to a math problem.
That makes sense. You got to have some kind of safeguard in place to prevent it from getting stuck in this infinite loop of self-improvement.
Yeah, it's about targeted improvements, not just endless tinkering. But what's really cool is that these stopping conditions are actually relatively simple to implement. We're not talking about redesigning the entire AI system from the ground up. It's more about just giving it some additional instructions to guide that self-refinement process.
And that's incredible. It sounds like this could be a game changer for how we interact with AI and what we could potentially achieve with it.
Absolutely. And honestly, the implications go way beyond just making AI better at very specific tasks.
Okay, now you've got me really curious. So what are some of those bigger implications of this self-refined technique? I mean, what could this mean for the future of AI as a whole? This self-refined thing is pretty wild. It feels like we're on the verge of AI that can not only do what we ask it to do, but can actually understand its own work and make it better and on a deeper level than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, it really could be a total paradigm shift in how we even think about AI.
Yeah.
I think what's really exciting is that this isn't just about, making AI better at what we can already do. This is about opening up totally new possibilities.
Okay, so like, what are we talking about here? Paint me a picture. What's the big picture?
Okay, so imagine AI that can not only, let's say, write code, but it can actually design entirely new algorithms that are optimized for speed and efficiency that we've never even thought of. Or AI that can write stories that aren't just mimicking what's already out there, but actually understands what makes a good story, those underlying principles, and can then apply them in new and creative ways.
So we're not just talking about automation anymore. This is about AI actually being a partner in the creative process.
Exactly. And not even just a passive partner, but
Yeah.
one that's actively contributing ideas, critiquing our work, really helping us push those boundaries of what's possible.
Okay, now you're getting me really excited about all of this. But I have to ask, how realistic is this? Are we going to start seeing this, next week? Or is this still firmly in the realm of science fiction?
Well, it's still early days for sure, but the exciting thing about self-refining is that this is all based on existing LLM technology. We're not talking about some far-off future where we need to develop like entirely new AI architectures or something. The researchers have already shown that this technique can be implemented with, honestly, very few changes to those models that are already out there.
So it's not really a question of if, it's more a question of when we start seeing this tech become more mainstream, part of all those AI applications that we use.
That's exactly right. And that's why I think it's so important to be having these conversations now to really think about the implications. Like, what are the ethical considerations? How is this going to impact different industries?
Yeah.
How do we make sure that this technology is being used to benefit everybody?
I'm really glad you brought up the ethics because this is all very impressive, but it's hard not to feel at least a little bit apprehensive about all of this. I mean, we are talking about AI that can basically think for itself, right? And refine its own work. I mean, where does that leave us?
It's a valid concern. And honestly, it's one that even the researchers themselves acknowledge in the paper. This kind of technology could be incredibly beneficial. But like you said, it's not without its risks. And those are things that we need to address head on.
So, like, what could go wrong here? Give me a worst case scenario.
Well, let's take the example of AI-generated content, right? Like we were talking about earlier, self-refine could lead to some seriously persuasive and engaging writing, but that same power could be used to spread misinformation or propaganda that's incredibly targeted and very effective.
Yeah, it's like we're giving someone this incredibly powerful tool, but without any kind of moral compass or instruction manual on how to use it responsibly.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important that we develop clear ethical guidelines for how we develop and use AI. And not just that, but we need transparency, accountability. How are these systems actually being used? These are all questions we need to be asking.
So it's not enough to just focus on the technology itself. We have to create the social and ethical frameworks that go along with it. We can't just wait until it's too late. We have to be having these conversations now.
I completely agree. This is a pivotal moment in the evolution of AI, and the decisions that we make today are going to have a huge impact on the future.
And that's the truth. It's a lot to unpack, but if we want to shape the future of AI in a responsible and beneficial way, we have to understand what it's capable of. And that includes techniques like self-refine.
Yeah, no kidding. There's definitely a lot to think about here. I mean, it's exciting, right? We have this technology that could completely revolutionize so many aspects of our lives. But at the same time, if it's misused, it could also be incredibly damaging.
It's a tough spot to be in, that's for sure. But I'm hopeful. I really do think that if we can have these conversations openly, and we have them now, then we can work through a lot of these things and make sure that we're steering AI in a positive direction.
I like your optimism. I hope you're right. So, where do we even begin? What concrete steps can we take to ensure that as AI gets more sophisticated, it's still being used ethically and responsibly? Well, I think one really important thing is just making sure that people understand AI better, the general public. The more people understand how these systems work, what they can and can't do, the better equipped everyone will be to make informed decisions about how AI is being developed and used.
It's about making sure people aren't afraid to engage with this stuff, that they don't shy away from the complexity.
Exactly. And of course, we need to establish those ethical guidelines, regulations for AI development. We have to address things like bias, data privacy, even just the potential impact of AI on the workforce.
We have to make sure that AI is benefiting everyone, not just a select few.
100%. And, research is going to be key here too. Research into AI safety and making sure that these systems are robust. That means figuring out how to detect potential risks. Like,
Yeah.
how do we prevent AI from being used to spread misinformation? How do we prevent it from creating, harmful content? These are all questions that researchers are already looking at.
So it's not enough to just build an impressive AI system. We have to make sure that it's built with good intentions and that it's designed to operate safely and ethically in the real world.
Exactly. And that takes everyone working together, computer scientists, ethicists, lawyers, people from all different fields.
A real team effort. But I do think that if we have the right mix of innovation and collaboration and some good old-fashioned oversight, we can harness this technology, all of its power, and use it for good.
I agree with you. The future of AI isn't set in stone. We are the ones writing the story with every decision we make, with every conversation like this one, even with every line of code that we write.
Very well said. It has been an absolutely fascinating deep dive into self-refine and, what increasingly sophisticated AI might have in store for us. A huge thank you to our expert for walking us through all of this.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, to our listeners, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time. Keep those questions coming, and most importantly, never stop learning.